A few days ago, corporate veteran Rajiv Bajaj faced brickbats and high praise for speaking about the fear in corporate India from the government, while his son and Bajaj Auto MD Rajiv Bajaj has proven plain speak runs in the family. With comments at a launch event in Mumbai today, Bajaj Jr. was answering a question from ET Now on what he expects the union budget for the beleaguered auto industry and what he hopes the finance minister will do. Here's what he said.
I don't think there is anything that the budget can do that will immediately solve the problem that the industry finds itself in terms of the slowdown or the lack of growth. Because in my view, the budget was never the problem in the first place. It is now about 1.5 years that sales or business has been headed down. And there are always multiple reasons for something like this. But in my view, the single most important reason or the most inimical factor out there responsible for this state of affairs is over-regulation. It is over-regulation that is killing the industry. And what I mean by that is what started in September 2018 in terms of insurance costs. Several thousands of rupees of insurance cost was imposed on every customer that wanted to buy a typical two-wheeler. In cities like Mumbai, to drive at 20 kilometers an hour, and the state of the roads being what they are and so on and so forth, to impose ABS and 8-10,000 rupees on an average person who's buying a 150cc motorcycle. I mean, in my view, this is completely over the top. In my view, getting rid of old vehicles through a suitable mechanism would have been much more effective than squeezing out the last little bit of emission from a BS4 vehicle. But instead of doing that, we are going to impose BS6 now from April and impose another 8-10,000 rupees. You've seen some of the two-wheelers, BS6 two-wheelers are already launched, and you have seen the price increase varies from about 7,000 rupees to 18,000 rupees. So let's say another 8-10,000 rupees if we are going to impose on consumers. That means in a 1.5 year period, prices of two-wheelers in this country, the common man's two-wheeler, I'm not talking of a 20 lakh rupee super premium motorcycle, will go up by 30%. Now, to me, this is the hard, tangible issue on the ground. अब ये ऊपर से इन लोग ये सब FM, बजट ये सब बातें करते रहेंगे, उससे कुछ होने वाला है नहीं, कोई प्रॉब्लम सॉल्व नहीं होने वाला. Does the government have the humility to reflect and roll back some of this? Can they be pragmatic? And just as, for example, for electric vehicles, they have brought GST down to 5%, while IC vehicles continue to be 28%. Can they bring it down to, say, 18%, at least for a while? And then maybe over a period of 2, 3, 4 years, take it back to 28 if they have to, because governments are broke all over the world. So our government is also broke. So ultimately, they'll have to do it. But can they, at least for a period of time, absorb some of the hit that is going to come with BS6? Because industry is already reeling under a slowdown, and it's only going to become worse.
Well, some plain speak there from Rajiv Bajaj. Serious points raised that need deeper discussion. The basic question, is it truly over-regulation that he says that has contributed significantly to the auto sector's pain? And he is speaking specifically of two-wheelers, but we've seen that the whole industry has been going through flux. To speak more on this, I'm joined now by auto industry veterans, Nikunj Sanghi and Arun Malhotra. Welcome to both of you, and thank you for talking with us on this show today. Mr. Sanghi, let me begin with just your thoughts on what Rajiv Bajaj has said. Now, just for our viewers, he's talked about 4 pain points. He's talked about high insurance costs, which were made mandatory, some kinds of insurance which were made mandatory in September of 2018. He's talked about ABS for two-wheelers, which was made mandatory, BS6 norms, and high GST rates on four-wheelers as some of the pain points. Do you think that these are the main reasons for what we're seeing in the auto industry today?
So, well, I could not disagree with Mr. Rajiv Bajaj. What he's saying is plain truth and is right. cost of acquisition, I don't think it's just Mr. Bajaj. I think even Mr. R.C. Bhargav of Maruti has reiterated time and again that it's the cost of acquisition and sudden cost of acquisition which has gone up in the last 1 or 2 years, which is impacting the auto industry. But I would disagree to the fact that that is the only reason. I think there are a lot of other reasons besides just the cost of acquisition, which is making a difference. And I would also agree with him that it's not just the budget which will correct a lot of things, because budgets really are now exercises which are more in terms of record keeping and accounting than policy announcements. I think the GST Council and so many other policy announcements which come pre the budget and post the budget, they are the ones which really give solutions or which create problems. So to that extent, I agree with him. And yes, something needs to be done about this industry. Otherwise, the industry is crumbling. I would also agree to the fact that some very meaningful action is required to remove non-compliant vehicles on roads which are not even BS4 standards, because those are the ones which are contributing not just to emission and not just to pollution, but are the ones which are not roadworthy, the ones which are not safe. And the road accidents which are happening are because of those vehicles. The emission which is getting spoiled is because of those vehicles. So some action from the government on that front is definitely called for.
Okay, Mr. Malhotra, I want you to weigh in here on the points that Rajiv Bajaj has made, and the underlying, message and question and the harsh truth really is the accusation that it's government policy that has driven Motown into this situation. He goes on to say that I hope this government will reverse some of these things and will actually come out and accept that this is what has caused the problem. Do you think that's the need of the hour? Do you agree with that point of view, first of all?
I echo the sentiments expressed by Rajiv Bajaj. I agree with it. Actually, what happened is each of the regulation would have a logic to it. It's whether it's the insurance, whether it's a safety, whether Euro norms, but doing it all together within a period of 12 months, that has been the problem. And on top of it, although we say the GST for entry-level two-wheelers and cars is 28%, but what was not covered about 1.5 years back when the GST was introduced was the road tax was kept out of it. And what state governments have done, they have raised the road tax, which averagely used to be 6% to 10%. So effectively, entry-level two-wheelers and entry-level cars have effective tax rate of GST of 40%. Now, this is a very serious situation, and on top of it, it's compounded by the rural income, which has gone down because of the remunerative prices and because of the issues in the farming community. And as they say, desperate situation requires desperate remedies. Although the GST, the cut, which is being talked about a lot, is not part of the budget, but the budget can give a clear direction. And since the budget is around the corner in February and we have this Euro norms being implemented from the stroke of midnight of 31st March, I think a direction from the government to roll back from 27 to 18, and this 18 will also work to 30%. So there is a need for introspection and there is a need for clear action. To that extent, he's right, and I think the government is realizing it. Now, does it have the political will or the financial muscle to do it, to roll back? That's a question which is $1 million question.
No, why wouldn't it have the political will? I can't think of a stronger government in recent times. But let me put the counter view, because this is usually what you hear from the auto industry. Let me place the counter view. BS6 norms need to come sooner than later. It's the need of the hour when the world is tackling, climate change and high levels of pollution. India needs to get on with it. There was enough time and notice given to industry that this is going to change and it needs to be done. Number one. Number two, things like ABS should have been standard over the years in any case. Number three, the auto industry is in pain the world over. Things are truly changing. I'm not saying millennials are causing the slowdown. That's not a claim that I'm making. But there is a change in user habits. And the auto industry is seeming more and more like it's heading towards a huge paradigm shift, if not an extinction of the way things have been running so far. Mr. Sanghi, you've been seeing this the world over. So is it a time for the auto industry to also accept changing realities?
Absolutely. So the auto industry definitely is not saying that BS6 should not be brought in. The auto industry is all for safety because of the road accidents that are happening. In India, we are told that there are 419 deaths every day only because of road crashes. So we are for safety, we are for better emission norms, but see where the problem lies. Emission norms is to improve the environment. But is it the BS4 or the BS6 vehicles which will help? I think it is taking off vehicles which are not of any norms at all from the roads. They are the ones which are contributing to the environment the most. So shouldn't we be first removing those before bothering about cleaner vehicles being placed on the roads? And I think it's a policy which will automatically happen if we remove. And I think the industry has been talking to the government, has been requesting the government to now come out with a scrappage policy, which is incentive based. So people replace their vehicles. People remove the vehicles which are neither safe nor compliant to emission norms.
But then again, the reality of India, Arun Malhotra, both of you agreeing with each other, so I'm going to take the contrarian view over here. The reality of India, where really as a government and in power, would you really go and tell the Aam Aadmi who's managed to buy an old vehicle that now please scrap it and buy a new one because the auto industry needs to ramp up sales?
Not asking you to...
No, this discussion is being held. The government has been talking of the scrappage policy.
Yeah.
The challenge has been these vehicles. We are not talking of vehicles of 5 years or 10 years. We're talking of vehicles about 15 years. It can start from commercial vehicles where the running is easily more than 1 lakh kilometer a year. So there has to be an action somewhere. It can start with commercial vehicle, go to passenger vehicles later or passenger two-wheelers because the emotional impact is much higher. But that action has to start. It's been in discussion for 3 years. So clearly the agreement is there, but the point is how it is implemented. And the draft note has also been circulated. And regarding your point that the introspection industry required, definitely introspection is required. But I feel 80% of the problems of today is not because of introspection. 80% problems are that we have tried to do too many things together at the same time. So I'm not faulting all the points you said on emissions, safety, but how can you, it's like taking a lot of medicines together in a very short period. That's what compounded it, and that's had a negative cascading impact.
Yeah, that I think is an important point because that's something I hear from other sectors as well. Whether it's the real estate sector, which had to deal with demonetization, GST, RERA, all in one go, or the Indian economy to dealing with demonetization and GST. Mr. Sanghi, do you think that that's the broad message? That in a country like India, slow and steady, let's not try and fix everything together, and maybe industry, we have to admit, you're talking about introspection, maybe we have to admit that industry in India is also not capable of making these changes as quickly enough.
Absolutely. Absolutely. See, I think some of the industry has also talked about the cost of compliance, and more than the cost of compliance, about the burden of compliance. So if people as enlightened as Mrs. Kiran Shaw are talking about being burdened by compliance and compliant costs and about the fear of compliance, I think definitely something needs to be done to make the industry far more comfortable. I'm not saying don't go against the rogues, please go against the rogues. But because of those rogues, should you regulate the entire industry and put so much burden on compliance? That is definitely a question that we all need to together answer.
Absolutely. Too much, too soon. How do you balance new technologies and new needs with existing infrastructure? It's a big theme, a big story, and it continues to some extent after the break as well. I want to thank you, Mr. Sanghi and Mr. Malhotra, for joining us on the debate this evening. Very short break on India Development Debate. Don't go anywhere. We have so much to offer in this one show. Value for your time if you spend it with us. After the break, we're talking about the big Bezos visit. Jeff Bezos is coming to India after 5 years. There will be much fanfare, but he's coming at a time when the Competition Commission of India is gunning for his Amazon and for Flipkart. They're going to check if they're flouting the rules. Data localization is another big issue. We're going to debate in a face-off coming up next, the claims on both sides of that story. We're also going to get you the views of Ashwat Damodaran, exclusively excerpts of that big interview on India Development Debate up ahead on the show. A lot to come back for. Please, let's see you after the break.